Alex Eala's retaliation against a dishonest rival was ruthless, well thought out, music icy, and utterly devastating. The entire tennis world was shocked by what Rafael Nadal said after witnessing it. This was more than just a game of tennis. This 20-year-old Filipino girl was standing by herself on a hostile court in a hostile nation with a hostile crowd. Even the chair umpire was unable to ignore the calls made against her because they were so blatantly unfair, incorrect, and persistent. They attempted to pilfer her gold medal. They attempted to disrupt her rhythm, shake her calm, and deprive her of a moment that had been planned for a whole country for 26 years. Instead, they witnessed the most calm, fierce, and emotionally devastating demonstration of mental toughness in women's tennis in many years. Stay put, because the entire story of what transpired in Bangkok begins long before that sunny afternoon and is more remarkable than any headline. You have to go back to the very beginning of Alex Eala's story, not just the start of the 2025 season, in order to comprehend why what transpired in Bangkok had such a profound impact. Because it took a year to build the girl who stood on that court in Thailand in December 2025. Most people who watch the highlights will never truly understand the lifetime of sacrifice that went into building her. On May 23, 2005, Alexandra Manalo Eala was born in Quezon City, Philippines. A country that had produced world-class fighters, basketball icons, and boxing legends, but had never in its entire modern sporting history placed a player inside the top 50 of the WTA rankings. Tennis was not just a foreign sport in the Philippines. It was, for most of the country's history, a sport that belonged to someone else's story, someone else's country, someone else's future. At 13 years old, Eala left home and moved to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy. Let that land for a moment. 13 years old, thousands of miles from family in a foreign country, learning a foreign language, competing every single day against players who had been groomed for professional tennis since they could walk. Most kids that age are figuring out high school. Alex Eala was figuring out how to become a professional athlete in one of the most competitive sports on the planet. The academy didn't just teach her technique. It installed something harder to measure. A philosophy of competition forged by the most relentless champion the sport had ever seen. Rafael Nadal had built his legend not on talent alone, but on an almost frightening refusal to give in. That DNA, that approach, that burning insistence on fighting for every single point, regardless of the score or the circumstances, Eala absorbed it daily for years. She had trained at Nadal's academy since she was 13 years old, and the surefire Hall of Famer kept tabs on her throughout what became a breakthrough 2025 season. That relationship between the sport's greatest champion and a young Filipino girl chasing history would become one of the most compelling subplots in women's tennis throughout the year. And what a year it was! Eala started 2025 ranked 147th in the world and reached a career-high ranking of 50, becoming the first Filipino player to break into the top 50 WTA rankings. She compiled 40 wins and 26 losses while earning over $900,000 in prize money. She defeated Grand Slam champions. She reached her first WTA final. She won her first professional title. She became, in the space of 12 months, the most famous tennis player in Asia and arguably the most popular player on the WTA tour anywhere in the world. But all of that, every ranking point, every trophy, every standing ovation was building toward December 2025, toward Bangkok, toward a court in Thailand where the most important match of her young career was waiting and where someone was about to make the catastrophic mistake of trying to cheat Alex Eala out of her moment. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Because the girl shaped by Nadal's academy doesn't crack. She doesn't panic. She doesn't complain and crumble. She locks in. She narrows her gaze and she makes you suffer for every single thing you tried to take from her. Bangkok was about to find that out. You think you've seen gamesmanship in tennis? You haven't seen anything yet. What transpired in that Bangkok final was so brazen, so premeditated, and so unrelenting that even neutrals watching from halfway across the world were enraged. Keep watching, because what Eala did next was something nobody expected. December 18, 2025, the National Tennis Development Center in Nonthaburi, Thailand. The gold medal match in the 33rd Southeast Asian Games Women's Tennis Sleaze Final. Alex Eala of the Philippines versus Mananchangkia Sawangka of Thailand. The host nation's player on the host nation's court in front of a host nation's audience. The atmosphere was electrifying and extremely partisan before a single ball was struck. Eala had beaten Malaysia's Xiaomi Leong in the quarterfinals and Thailand's Naklo Thosaporn in the semi-finals to reach this moment. And even in those early rounds, the Filipino contingent in the stadium had been noisy, impassioned, and emotionally involved. But nothing could prepare them for what the final would bring. A statement was the first set. Eala was completely in charge, clinical, and domineering. She won 6-1. The scoreline appeared simple. It was not at all like that. Eala's level was just too high, despite Wangkaga's efforts to scrape, probe, and find ways in. The gold medal was nearly within reach after 6 games and 1 for the opposition. The interference then started as the second set got underway. In Game 2, the first dubious decision was made. The linesperson called out a ball that any impartial spectator could see was inside the line. Eala looked at the cue. The call stood even though she had not yet responded. In the third game, the second occurred. One more ball. One more out call. This one is even harder to defend. The crowd's Filipino supporters started whispering. Still, the Thai audience let forth a roar. Next was the third. And there was no way to defend this one. Eala asked that the linesperson be replaced after the umpire overruled the linesperson's third incorrect call. She expressed a request in measured businesslike language, moved quietly to the chair, and maintained her cool. She wasn't screaming, crying, or putting on a show. As a professional athlete, she defended her right to impartial officiating. The person in charge of lines was replaced. However, the line calls weren't the only interruptions. 3 consecutive incorrect line calls, an unusually long break when Eala's opponent Manancha Wanka Gallo went to the lockers, and even a shoe insole change at 15 love during a game when Eala was in full rhythm. Her momentum was building, and the gold medal was getting closer with every shot, according to one ex-fan. The opponent halted, took a seat, and replaced her shoe's insole in the midst of it all. This is the portion of the tale that caused a nationwide uproar over a tennis match. Not only in the Philippines, but globally as well. Tennis fans who had never watched a SEA Games play before were now typing angrily about gamesmanship tactics, lineperson rotation, and what constitutes a respectable strategy against what goes too far. During the restroom break, Eala remained seated in her chair. She took a breath. She sipped her water. She gazed at her strings. She showed them no signs of weakness. Not one. In the 8th game of the second set, with the score was tied at 30, Eala took the lead with a powerful backhand. Sanka then committed a fault to finish her historic campaign. 61-62 was the final score. She prevailed. She triumphed comprehensively and ruthlessly in spite of everything, every disrupted rhythm, every incorrect call, every deliberate delay. The retaliation was more than just a triumph. It was a masterclass. This is what, however, makes the story even more compelling. Someone had previously attempted to intimidate Alex Eala on a public platform. A few months prior, at the US Open, something occurred on a court in New York that made the situation in Bangkok seem insignificant in comparison, and the consequences were felt all over the world. Go back 4 months in time. August of 2025. The world's largest tennis arena is Arthur Ashe Stadium. Alex Eala made her main draw debut at the US Open. The 14th seed, former Grand Slam champion, and one of the most seasoned players on the circuit, Clara Tolson of Denmark, is her opponent. Eala was the underdog by all standards. At the time, she was rated 75th in the world. Tolson was situated, seasoned, and competing on a court she was familiar with. Before the first ball was hit, the script was written. Before losing to the more seasoned player, the gifted young wild card puts on a valiant show. The narrative is over. That script was not sent to Eala. The first set was won by her 63. Clean, impressive, and authoritative. After Tolson tied it in the second set, 6-2, the third set degenerated into one of the most dramatic finishes in the history of the US Open's opening round. Eala trailed 15 in the third set, but refused to quit. She staged a gutsy comeback, scrapping to 45. Then came the controversy. At the net, she flicked a ball and it wasn't apparent if her racket had crossed the tape, a violation if it had. Chair umpire Caterni requested for a video review. The stadium held its breath. Calm, Eala waited at the net. Tolson gazed. The electrifying tension that only a big controversy on a big platform can produce was palpable in the crowd. It was settled by the replay. Aya was given the point when Nan determined that her shot was fair. At 15:40, she now had 2 opportunities to break. But Tolson exploded. As the sound of alcohol reverberated through the stands, she exclaimed at Nan, "Look at the ball. What is your opinion about this? What is your opinion?" She refused to serve and stood at the baseline with her hands on her hips as the wait continued. This is where things start to get very amazing. It had been Eala who had the dubious shot. She had won the review. Even still, she remained calm and silent as she stood in the middle of the storm, while her opponent, the seasoned, sitting professional, was melting. The entire theater had turned upside down. Consider the psychological strain of that situation. You're 20 years old. This is your first Grand Slam. The entire globe is observing. The umpire is being yelled at by your opponent. The audience is agitated. And since you have the momentum and can't let it go, you need to maintain your composure for a little while longer. She grasped it. The match ended in a tiebreak. In the intense back-and-forth conflict, Aya maintained her composure and sealed it. 76-7 points to 6, with Tolson holding off on making it simple until the very end. In any case, Aya prevailed. Alexandra Aya then advanced to the following round of her first-ever U.S. Open. In the Open era, she was the first Filipino woman to win a match in a Grand Slam singles main draw. 2 contested calls in gamesmanship, 2 hostile circumstances, 2 attempts to derail her from history, 1 involving a disputed net shot and a psychological siege, and 2 disputes. On 2 occasions, Alex Eala managed to walk through the flames without getting burned. What was Rafael Nadal's response to all of this? When the guy who founded the academy that produced Alex Eala seen his pupil deal with 2 of the most tense situations in recent women's tennis, what did he say? You'll get chills when you hear the answer. Don't give up now. On November 19, 2024, Rafael Nadal announced his retirement from competitive tennis. He returned to the tennis court exactly a year later, this time to practice with Alex Eala at his academy in Monar, Mallorca, rather than to compete. It felt almost planned because the symbolism was so expertly crafted. Returning to the court for the first time in a year, the greatest fighter the sport had ever produced decided to do so with the player who most exemplified the spirit he had spent his career establishing. It was wonderful to be back on a tennis court a year later. Nadal posted on social media to share their practice session with his more than 14 million followers on X. It was great to practice with you, Alex Eala. Next time I will be stronger, he wrote. In a matter of hours, the post became viral. More than 100 million impressions across all platforms. A court is shared by a budding star and a retiring legend. Sharing something that was like watching a torch pass in real time. On Instagram, Aya replied, "Return as if you had never left." 4 phrases. The kind of casual, friendly shorthand communication that occurs when 2 individuals have a true connection. The champion and his successor, the graduate and her mentor. However, what transpired earlier in the year revealed the fuller picture of how intently Nadal had been observing Aya's struggles, scandals, and triumphs. Nadal didn't wait for a news conference or a formal time to respond when Aya defeated Madison Keys and Agos Viek back-to-back in the Miami Open, one of the largest platforms in women's tennis. In an interview, Aya revealed, "Rafa messaged me. He had never messaged me directly before. It was unexpected to see that. It's funny because I didn't notice it until a few days later. Seeing his notice was thrilling. After 6 years of studying at his institution, this was the first time he had personally messaged her. He picked up his phone and wrote to her personally after witnessing her deal with adversarial opponents, contested calls, and the weight of a nation's hope." Following her victory over world number 2 Swiatek, Nadal tweeted on X, "We are extremely proud of you, Aya. What a fantastic competition. Let's continue to dream." Rafael Nadal, who spent 20 years using his unwavering belief to turn unattainable ambitions into Grand Slam trophies, wasn't merely complimenting when he said, "Let's keep dreaming." He didn't merely observe from a distance. Those words were a blessing, a signal, a declaration that said, "I see what you are becoming and I believe in where you are going." Joan Bosch, Ayla's coach, described how Nadal directly intervened to provide direction at the academy. Tony was also present at that time, and he was discussing a few things with Rafa. Rafa then made the independent choice to descend as, I suppose, he felt a connection to the circumstances. He even admitted to Aya that I had experienced this in the past. Who is better to know how to make things better than him? Try doing this other thing. This used to happen to me too, the best player in the sport's history said to a 20-year-old Filipino girl standing on a practice court. This connection between his and her experiences is the central theme of the narrative. Because Nadal is a living example of what it's like to be undervalued, to be doubted, to stand on a court where the circumstances, the crowd, and the conditions are all against you, and to discover something within yourself that is just stronger than anything. In Aya, he noticed the same thing. After giving it a name, he grabbed up a racket and began showing her how to sharpen it even further. The response from the internet was precisely what you would anticipate. Millions of comments and millions of views. Filipino fans are simultaneously sharing videos of Nadal's training session and the US Open play in Bangkok, constructing a story that seemed almost too dramatic to be true. However, it was genuine. Each and every frame. Take a step back and consider 2025 in its entirety. Because the women's tennis community is just now starting to properly comprehend what Alex Eala accomplished in a year and how she did it. Aya was ranked 147th in the world in the